Hey guys, it's Jen. Welcome back. So today's video is an idea that I got when I was showing the new Bare Necessities palette from Colourpop on my Instagram page and also here on YouTube in my Sunday haul. And I just got a lot of comments from you guys saying that you liked the look of this palette, but you didn't want to buy it because it's too large and too overwhelming. It does have 30 shades inside, and I admit when you first look at a big palette like this, it's hard to decide what colors to use and what goes with what. So I thought I would take the opportunity to, at the same time as I'm kind of giving this palette a review and doing some looks with it, to also go through my thought process on picking shades and how to do that, because it might help you to kind of feel like these are not as overwhelming as you thought they were. It took me quite a long time. I used to get super overwhelmed with palettes like this too, but I just feel like the more I've been playing with makeup and eyeshadow over the years, now I kind of have a system down as far as how I do my eyeshadow, plus I've learned how to recognize warm tones and cool tones. So I'm going to go over all of that with you and just really break it down simply. Now this is just the way that I do it. I don't know that it's necessarily going to work for everybody, but I just wanted to share my thoughts. So I'm going to just go ahead and turn the camera around and just show the palette first, and then I'm going to get into the 3 looks that I created using the palette and walk you through my thought process with those as well. So why don't we go ahead and jump right in and get started. Alright, so when I'm about to use a palette like this, the first thing that I consider is what kind of a look am I going for? Is it something soft and just easy, you know, kind of neutral, casual, or is it something more glam or more smoky? And then I take into consideration what I'm wearing. Usually I'll match my eyeshadow to my clothing, whatever color that may be, or if it's not completely matching, it's something complementary. If I'm wearing cool tones, I usually do a cool tone look. If I'm wearing warm tones, I go for warm tones. So you don't have to do that, obviously. That's just kind of something that I take into consideration when I'm looking at eyeshadow. And one question that I get all the time is, how do I know when something is warm toned or cool toned? So let me just zoom you in a little bit. Okay, so cool tone shades are generally something that has a little bit of gray behind it. So you're looking at this top row right here. These shadows, they're brown, but they're kind of grayish browns. So those would be considered cool tones. This silvery gray shade, definitely. This silver over here. Even this one, I mean, this whole row right here, this one I would call probably a neutral, not necessarily cool, but these all are cool tones. And then also anything that has a purple base to it usually is cool toned, like these purple shades right here. And then warm tones are something that has a bit of orange or peachiness behind it. So for example, you have this brown right here and this peachy color. These are both warm. Golds are usually more warm toned. You have obviously the orange colors are warm toned. This brown down here, you can see it kind of has a little bit of like an orangey tone to it. That's a warm tone as well. And then there are just straight up neutral shades, like I mentioned in the beginning, that aren't really warm or cool. They're right in the middle, like this one here. This one, even this brown right here, Hot Gossip, this one is more neutral. So it doesn't really have that grayish undertone that the cool tones have, and it doesn't have that orangey or peachy tone like the warm tones have. It's just very in the middle. Sometimes with pinks can go either way. If it's more of a dusty pink with, again, a little gray behind it, it could be a cool tone. Or those like bright purpley pinks, those are also more cool toned. But there are also pinks that are warm toned. There's none in this palette right now, but think of more like a corally or a peachy pink. Those ones, because they have, again, that peachy and orange undertone to them, it makes them more of a warm tone pink. And the same thing with browns as well. You can see that browns can go either way. You can have the cooler browns like these, or you can have the warmer browns like this one and this one right here. So that's just a basic overview of how I look at warm and cool tones. But I just think grayish or purplish undertone cool, orangey or peachy undertone warm. And if it doesn't have either one of those, it's probably more like a neutral like that. Okay, so then I want to break down quickly how I actually choose colors that go together. So normally I'm sticking within a family, either a cool tone look or a warm tone look. You can definitely mix warm and cool tones together, but that's a little bit more advanced than I'm going to get in this video, and I don't usually do that very often, so I'm just going to stick to what I usually do. So generally, I don't use more than 3 colors on my eyes. You totally can, and then you could just add more colors to what I'm about to show you, but I'm just going to show you a basic 3 color look and how I get those because that's usually what I do. So first I'm going to be looking for a transition color, and then next I'm going to be looking for a deeper color to put in my crease and outer corner of my eye, and then last but not least I'm going to be looking for a shimmer shade usually to go on my lid. It doesn't have to be, sometimes you can do an all matte look, but that's just how I'm going to break it down for this video. So first I'm going to look for a transition shade, and transition shades normally I don't want them to be more than 1 or 2 shades deeper than my skin tone. You can use a mid-tone if you're fair like me for a transition, but you're just going to have to do a little bit more blending. So colors that I would pick for transitions in this palette are ones like this one, this one, this one, while it's a mid-tone, it sheers out really beautifully. This one is a little bit light, but I could use it. These are a little too light. I would call these more like highlight shades if I wanted to put something under the brow bone or just to blend out that transition if it has harsh edges. So I wouldn't really pick these over here. These two are great transition shades. So that's basically it. I mainly stick to the top half of the palette for transitions, and I actually love how Colourpop laid this out because they went lightest to darkest with the colors, so that's really great and makes it super easy. So then for the outer corner, I would go more of like a mid to dark shade, depending on the look that I want to create. I'll use something darker if I want a little bit more of a smoky look, or I'll use a mid-tone like this one, or this orange, or this brown. In my outer V, and just to deepen up the crease if I'm going for just a more simple casual look. And then I would use shades like this one. Usually I don't use black, but any of these really dark ones down here I would use if I want to like amp up the look or make it a little bit smokier. And then the shimmer shades all throughout the palette can be just used on the lid. So those are the 3 shades that I'm going to be using, but how do I pick what color? I would say I usually pick the shimmer shade first because that's the one that's going on your lid. That's the one that you're going to see the most. The other ones just kind of peek out on top of it a little bit. So for example, let's say I want this gray on my lid right here. I'll start with this, and then I'll just try to think about what colors would look nice with this gray. So for transitions, again, I'm looking at the top half of the palette. I would say either this one or this one would go beautifully with that because they're both cool toned. I think they would work really nicely. And then for a darker matte for my outer corner, I could always use this one, or even some of these down here, which have the little micro glitter in them, but they're still matte shades. They could still work easily. Another example would be if I wanted to use this kind of rose gold shimmer on my lid, I could choose maybe some purples to go with it, or something that's in the pink and purple kind of family. So I could use this as my transition color and then these deeper purples as the outer corner or outer V shades. Or I could just make it more of a neutral look and put this with a neutral brown like this one, for example. So you could do either or. I generally like to pair pinks with purples or other kind of rosy tone shades, but you could really use neutrals with absolutely anything. And then when it comes to warm tones, let's say I want to put this coppery shade on my lid. I could use this one as my transition, which is just an easy neutral shade, or I could use this warmer brown up here for my transition and kind of blend it out with the peachy one. And then I could use this orange to deepen up the crease a little bit, or I could use this warmer brown down here. So again, I'm just sticking with that warm color family. And then once I kind of have a sense of what I want to do, I usually dip into the palette and I'll swatch those colors on the back of my hand and just make sure that they look nice together. So for example, the gray look, I'll use this one as my transition, this as my lid shade, and then maybe this cooler brown as the outer corner. All right, so there's our transition shade. Here's the lid shade. And I'm just trying to see how well these actually pair together. So yeah, I mean, I think those shades are complementary. As long as nothing looks super clashy or weird, I think, you know, you've got a good look going on. Then if you wanted to deepen it up a little bit or add something additional to it, like, you know, an inner corner highlight, let's say, you could always use like this one here. and just show like a little inner corner highlight and see how it plays with the lid shade right here. Again, it looks really, really pretty. If you wanted a deeper matte shade to deepen up the crease even further, you could always just apply this one here and see kind of how this pairs with it as well. I mean, I think these all go really nicely together. And actually, this shade is really cool toned. It's almost making this brown look a little warmer. So these are all just really complementary shades, and it would make a really nice, beautiful, smoky taupe kind of a look. So those are just some really basic steps on how to choose eyeshadows in a palette. That's how I do it. Like I said, I don't know that it's correct necessarily. I don't think anything in makeup is like correct or not correct. You do what you want to do. But I just wanted to share my thought process with you guys. And it does seem like a lot of steps, but once you first get a palette, you know, figure out which ones are your transition shades, figure out which ones are your lid shades, just figure out where you want the shadows to go on your eyes. And then once you can recognize the warm tones versus the cool tones and stuff, I think then you can just open up a palette and look at it and choose the colors pretty quickly. It's just a matter of when you first get a palette to kind of study it. And they're not always going to be that difficult because sometimes palettes are like all warm tones. Like for example, the Gingerbread Extra Spicy palette from Too Faced. If you look in here, every single shade in this palette pretty much is a warm tone with the exception of this blue right here. But these all go together so beautifully. You can just pick and choose whatever shades you want for your transition, lid, and outer corner. And you don't really have to think about, am I mixing warm tones with cool tones? Do these shades go together? They all go together pretty much. But when it comes to a palette like this with a lot more variety and they're giving you options of cool and warm tones, yeah, they're not always going to look right together. But there's also something to be said for mixing like a warmer gold shade with a purple shade. I think that combo is really beautiful. But getting into mixing tones can be a little bit tricky sometimes, so that's why I'm just showing you really basic, simple, like all cool tone looks or all warm tone looks. So that's basically it. So why don't we go ahead now and jump into the 3 looks. All right, so now that you know a little bit more about my thought process, let's get into the 3 looks that I created. And I did all of them using the new Colourpop brush roll. This is a really, really nice brush set. I believe it is currently sold out. Hopefully it's gonna come back soon, but you have so many different eye brushes to choose from, as well as a couple of face brushes as well. I haven't used the face brushes yet, and the eye brushes, I've only used 4 to do these looks, but I know I'm gonna get use out of the others just because they're kind of all more of a small size, which is great if you have hooded eyes because it helps you to put the shadow exactly where you want it. So I'll show you quickly the 4 brushes that I was using for looks. So the first brush I usually pick up is the E16 brush. This is like a crease brush. It's a little bit more on the fluffy side, but it's not super large. So it's great for dipping into a transition shade and then putting it right into the eye socket and just doing the windshield wiper motion and blending up and out. And if I feel like I need to diffuse the edges a little bit, I'll pick up the E15 brush, which is basically the same thing. It's just a little bit larger. So you can see this is it over here. And that one really does a great job at buffing out all the harsh edges. It's really big and fluffy. And then for my deeper crease shade and outer corner, I've been using the E19, which is again a little bit smaller. It's the same kind of shape, but it's just smaller than both of these. And this one does a great job at getting right up into that crease and not going into the transition. So I use this just to put the shadow exactly where I want it in the outer V. And then again, I'll blend with this middle one right here. And then the 4th brush I'm using is the E20. This is a really tiny little flat brush like that. And I use this to line underneath my eyes, but I'm also using it in the outer corner again, just if I want to pack on a little bit more shadow or darken it up. This one is great because it's so tiny. So it does a great job at, again, placing the shadow exactly where I want it. If I do need to blend that out, I'll go in with the smallest crease brush that I was using and then just diffuse that in the outer corner. So these 4 are basically all that I've needed for these looks, but I'm positive I'll end up using all the brushes in this collection eventually, depending on what looks I want to do. When it came to lid shades, I just used my finger because I find that that's usually, no matter what type of eyeshadow I'm using, the best way to get the best color payoff. So anyway, let's go ahead now and jump into the 3 looks. So for look number 1, I decided to do more of a taupey gray silvery kind of look because I was wearing a gray sweatshirt that day. As I mentioned before, I do try to pair the eyeshadow with what I'm wearing just so that's a little bit more of a cohesive look. You don't have to do that, but it's just something I like to do. And I love this one because it was just so soft and pretty. We were going Christmas shopping that day. I didn't want anything too bold or dramatic. I just wanted more of an everyday look. So for this look, I basically just went right across the top row here with these grayish taupey shades. So the first shade that I used was on holiday. This is a perfect transition shade for my lighter skin tone. It's like a grayish taupey matte shade. It's really just perfect to add that first layer of color. It's just like one step deeper than my skin tone. And then to deepen up the crease, I went into the shade Banter, which is a cooler toned brown. And this one's also a matte shade. And I just applied this with that smaller crease brush and just put it right into the crease and also in my outer V and maybe like the outer third of my eye. I also took that Banter shade and lined underneath my eyes using that tiny little flat brush. And this just helps to connect the bottom lash line with the top and just make everything look cohesive. And then for my lid, I used the shade Rumored. I just went ahead and applied this with my finger, and this shade is the most beautiful taupey gray shimmer. It applied really beautifully. It's a very smooth shadow. It doesn't have a lot of glitter particles to it. It just looks kind of shiny on the eye. So I didn't have to wet it or anything, although if you wanted to do that, you could get a more intense look. So here's the finished look. As I said before, it's just really easy, simple, and pretty. And then moving on to the pinky purple look, I was wearing kind of a pinky lavender sweater that day, so I decided again to kind of match what I was wearing. And I also really love the way this look came out. It's very soft and pretty with the dusty pink and the lavender shades that I used. So I started out with the shade All For You, which is a really light lavender, kind of like a dusty lavender color. It's really beautiful. It's a matte shade, and I applied that to my crease and blended it up. This is another great transition shade for my skin tone because it's just a little step darker than my natural tone. And then to deepen the crease and apply to the outer corner, I used the shade Act a Fool, which is a matte, deep plummy shade. And just like the first look, I used this one in the crease with the small crease brush and blended that out. And then I also applied it to the outer third of my eye just to give it some depth. Then I went into the shade Spree, and this is a lighter plummy shade. It's a really beautiful kind of pinky plum that has glitter flecks in it. It's a matte shade, but it's one of those ones that has a little glitter. So I put this one all over my lid. Then I went in with the shade Designer Duds, which is like a pinky sort of rose gold shimmer. And I applied that right on top just to add some sheen to my lid. And this one also is not an overly glittery or shimmery or metallic shadow. It's just a really beautiful soft shimmer. And then here's the finished look on that one too. It's just super easy to wear out. It's very, very casual. If you don't like super bold looks, I love this one too. And then for today's look, since I'm wearing an orange sweater, I decided to go for more of those rusty orangey shades in the palette. So I first started out with the shade Hot Gossip, which is actually a very neutral brown. And I applied this one as my transition shade, even though it's not a super warm tone color. Sometimes with really warm looks, I like to tone them down a little bit by using a neutral here and there, so the overall look isn't super orangey. And this shade is also a great transition color for my skin tone. And then I went into the shade Haute, which is like a deep orangey matte shade, and I used this one to deepen up the crease and also apply to the outer third of my eye, just like I did with the other looks. And then I went into the shade Fuzzy, which is a coppery shimmer shade, and I applied this all over my lid using my finger until I got to that edge with the matte shade in the corner. And with this look, I wanted to show you a perfect example of how you can always change up your look a little bit if you're not quite happy with the way that it's going. I could have left it just like this and it would have been fine, but I'm kind of feeling like it's just a little bit too orange for me. I want to tone it down somewhat. So then I decided to pick up a darker warm brown shadow just to kind of add a little bit of brown in there, and I picked up the shade Revel. This one is the perfect tone. It's very complementary to the orangey ones because it's so warm. And I put this one on the outer third of my eye and then blended it back towards the shimmery coppery shade that I used on my lid. And it just added a little dimension so it didn't look like it was all one color. And then I decided I wanted to brighten up the inner corner of my eye a little bit, so I took the shade The Talk, which is a golden shade, and gold shades work really well with warm tones. So I picked that one up on my finger and just tapped it on the inner corner and then blended it back towards the middle. So you kind of have a gradient effect going of the gold to the copper to the brown. So it goes from lightest to darkest across the eye and just creates that really beautiful warm tone, but the other two colors add a little bit of dimension to the look, so it's not just a completely orangey eye. Alright guys, so I think that's about everything I have, and as far as this palette goes, I really am enjoying it a lot. I think hopefully today in the video you saw how many different looks you can get out of it, and hopefully you feel a little bit less overwhelmed when looking at a palette like this. It's really super versatile because you can do purple looks, pink looks, neutrals, warm tone looks, grays. I mean, there's so much you could do depending on where you're going, what kind of, outfit you're wearing. If you're someone who doesn't have a huge makeup collection, I think you could get this palette and just use this and that's it. Or if you're new to makeup, it's something that just gives you a lot of options to play with, and the formula, as always, is amazing. Also, let me quickly insert some swatches just so you can see the whole palette laid out and get a good idea of what it looks like. I know I showed them in my Sunday haul already, but you can see here you have tons of different light colors to work with, a lot of mid-tones, and then on the bottom row there, a lot of really deep tones as well. So I just think this is a really awesome palette, especially if you love neutrals. So anyway, guys, I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Also, let me know down in the comments below if you like videos like this, if it helped you out. If it did, I will definitely make more of them. Thank you all so much for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and I will see you in my next video. Bye, guys.